If you're a part of this personal finance or investing kind of content stuff on the internet, you probably know who Dave Ramsey is. Honestly, one of the biggest finance channels on YouTube, really. And honestly, his show, I don't mind watching it every once in a while. I like hearing people's stories and what they come in and ask. Obviously, what Dave responds with sometimes is kind of insane. It doesn't really make all that much sense, but he has pretty good advice for people who are not good with money, right? If you cannot control yourself, Dave Ramsey's advice is probably good for you. If you have a little bit more self-control, then you might be able to actually venture away from it. But ultimately, I don't think Dave Ramsey is completely terrible, but there's a clip going around of some really bad advice he's giving. And that is him talking about retirement and people pulling stuff for retirement. So this is it right here. He basically goes off on someone who called in saying that one of his other co-hosts said to do a 3% withdrawal rate for your retirement stuff, which is actually makes sense. I know I think the normal thing is like 4%. That's what people plan on. But Dave Ramsey, that's not his style. He wants you to take out 8%. And the reason he gives don't make any sense.
Okay, I'm a little confused because I don't know what the hell George is doing a 3% withdrawal rate, because that's absolutely wrong. I'm going to have to find out where that video is and get it taken down. Because that's just wrong. You don't need to have a 3% withdrawal rate. That's ridiculous. Or I hope you misunderstood. I hope we didn't put out trash like that.
Was it 4 to 5%? Like that?
No, it shouldn't be 4 to 5%. It ought to be more than that. I mean, if you're making 12 in good mutual funds and the S&P is average 11.8, and if inflation for the last 80 years has averaged 4%, if you make 12 and you need to leave 4% in there for inflation raises, that leaves you 8.
So we can see Ramsey's math here, obviously saying, oh my God, 3%. What is that? What are you, crazy? And then tells you take out 8%, which is actually crazy. And especially when you look into the numbers, right? Dave says he's such a nerd. He's such a numbers guy. But when presented with numbers that go against what he's saying, all of a sudden the numbers don't matter anymore. The biggest problem he has right here is that he is assuming a 12% rate of return with 0 down years. 12% every year, in and out, never going down, never having more, only doing 12%. Now, why is that a bad assumption to have? It's pretty obvious, right? The S&P, the stock market, Bitcoin, any investment in the world has bad years. It goes down some years. So if you're pulling 8%, if you have a 12% year, sure, it's great. If you have a negative 10%, negative 20% year, like we've seen, I think right now, like 2022 was a negative 15% year overall for the S&P, and you pull 8% out, now you're making those losses worse. You're making it worse to a magnitude of 8, where you are saying instead of 15 loss, now you're taking 23% loss, and you're locking in those losses by selling and pulling that money out, and you're compounding the loss, right? So that's the reason why you can't assume you're going to get a 12%, which is higher than even the historical average over any 30-year period of the stock market ever. It's usually about somewhere between 7 to 9% is where the stock market, the S&P, goes up from. So to assume 12, I don't know where he's getting that number, but clearly he doesn't like looking at the numbers. And we can see with someone who responded to this saying, basically putting out here saying that they have parents who have friends who followed Dave Ramsey's advice of 8% a year, and guess what they had to do? Go back to work. So he talks about the 3% here, right? Where people talk about 3% withdrawal rates because it has a 100% success rate over a 30-plus year period. So he puts his chart here. If we look at this, you can see if you have everything in stocks, you're fully invested in stocks and don't hold any bonds or anything. If you did Dave Ramsey's 8% for 30 years, you have a 37% success rate. So that means you're more likely to run out of money. And then what do you do at that point, right? If you run out of money, if you worked your entire life to build up this portfolio where you can pull money from, and you go, Dave Ramsey said I can take 8%, and you take all that out, you're going to run out of money. You're more likely than not going to run out of money. And what happens if you run out of money? What do you do, right? You're going to be 30 years into retirement, and if you have no money, then what? Now you got to go back to work, and you're older. That's not going to be fun. That's not a situation anybody wants, and that's why we look at the 3% here. You see, if you're 100% in stocks, it has a 100% success rate. you will never run out of money doing 3% withdrawals, which I don't like seeing never, because there's always the slight chance, right? Something could happen, a black swan event, something could happen. But based off of these numbers going and like backtracking it and back testing and everything, you would have never ran out of money. You would have been perfectly fine. And that's what people want, right? In retirement, they want to know that they're going to be okay and not know that, well, 37% of the time you're going to be okay. But for the other, 63%, it's a flip. Maybe you're going to run out of money those other times. So you're more likely to run out of money. So have fun. And basically, Dave Ramsey, at the end of this clip, kind of talks about, oh, it's so stupid of people saying that. They're stealing people's hope and making it seem like you need more money. When, yeah, you need more money, right? It depending on how the math works out, how much money you want to live off of, all of this stuff, you can find out how much money you need. It's different for everyone. And running these numbers, if you want to make sure that you don't run out of money, 3% is the way to go. 4% is the top line. I've heard a lot of studies and people talk about that. And to say that, God, they're stealing hope, Dave is stealing people's lives, right? If you're saying withdraw 8% no matter what, at some point, it's more likely than not you're going to run out of money, and then you're screwed. And someone did this example with Bitcoin, because if your principles here can't really withstand up to these kind of extreme examples, then it's probably not great. But you can see over the last 10 years, Bitcoin has an average rate of return of 74% per year. If you subtract out inflation, that means you can safely take out 70% per year and never have to worry. It's just math. So obviously, if you followed this, and that's exactly what Dave is saying, right? If you just subtract out inflation and then take out the rest, you should be fine. Which, if you looked at Bitcoin, it's very volatile. Sure, stocks are less volatile, but Bitcoin, more volatile. But if you took out your 70% per year, you would run out of money very quickly, right? Especially if you were pulling stuff out and Bitcoin had an 80% drop and you sold 70% of your stuff at the drop because you're living off of that money, and that's the math that works out, you're going to run out of money. You're not going to be able to rebuild the wealth you had in there. It's an extreme example, but it's a good one, because a lot of your principles should be able to withstand extreme examples, right? Because it's just how it should work. And you look at Bitcoin's a perfect idea of volatility exists in markets. You cannot sit there and expect 12% per year every year without a doubt and say that, yeah, it's normal. The stock market will never have a down year. Pull out the 8% every year. What happens when there's a down year? What happens if there's multiple down years in a row? Then you're really screwed. You're going to run out of money exponentially faster. So it's just bad advice. It's crazy. It's not really that crazy that Dave's saying that. It's usually Dave Ramsey is kind of stuck in his ways and his values, and it's his way or the highway, and that's how it goes. But it's weird to see him it's just math. If you actually ran the math, it doesn't agree with you, right? So it can't just be math and not agree with you. Doesn't make any sense. But that's a clip going around for Dave Ramsey. Kind of, it's kind of crazy to see this being the advice he's putting out there. Again, I like listening to Dave Ramsey's shows. I like listening to the stories that people have to come in and tell, and how if they're deep in debt or if they successfully got out of it and successfully changed their life and made financial wealth and did all this stuff. It's interesting to hear those stories. And I don't think Dave Ramsey is the worst finance person on the internet. There's plenty of people worse. I think his advice works for a group of people who aren't really good with money. You should probably follow Dave's advice. But if you have some sort of self-discipline and you're decent with money at any level, then you might be able to stray away a little bit and kind of go on to the more math things that he goes on about, saying that, math doesn't work, emotions do in this case, which for some people it's true. For others, not so much. That's going to do it for this video. As always, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next